talk about reparations, we pay reparations. What do you mean you want reparations? Our taxpayer dollars, which are mostly white people paying that, goes to, affordable housing, government programs, EBT, scholarships, DEI, you guys getting jobs. Holy shit. Let's take all that, factor in the theft, factor in the crime, factor it in the murders, and then we'll talk about reparations on this show. How about that? You probably won't like that, will you? Because you're not going to like the numbers. But we are all, frankly, exhausted.
Hello guys, welcome once again to the channel. I hope wherever you're watching, you're having a great time. Now, many times you listen to white people and you don't understand how they reason. I came across this clip of a white lady trying to talk to black people with a lot of disrespect, telling them that you want reparations, yet we are the ones who have been giving you EBTs, food stamps. We're the ones who have been paying for your health care, good roads and everything in America. How do you want reparations again? And this took me by a surprise because I was wondering, from what point is this lady making these points? Why is she so sure that whatever she is standing on is some truth that she is able to defend when faced by facts? But I like the response that black people have given her. They have told her, you're first of all speaking from the point of ignorance. You don't understand history, and you don't understand how whiteness came into existence. She has been told that the amnesia, the selective amnesia that she chooses to have when speaking about reparations of black people and talking about how blacks have already received reparations in terms of welfare programs, that is lack of understanding of history. And I've always talked about how many white Americans have been projecting some information to the public, yet this information is unverified. It is some innuendos that are just passed around without any cogent evidence that somebody can present. It is so sad that from this day and age, still you find an adult who has the ability of reading, talking as though they don't understand the history of black people. First of all, the stand or the microphone she's speaking from came from black innovation. The wealth she has enjoyed, that head start that she has, came from industrialization of United States based on the labor that black people provided. So how can she say that blacks have been given everything, and she doesn't want their tax dollars, which according to her, it is whites who pay majority of that tax dollars. So it doesn't have to go to blacks freely. Does she understand how chattel slavery worked? Does she understand the sweat, the blood, and tears black people had to give America for the industrialization and development of America? Take a listen to the responses that some black sisters and brothers are giving her here. I shall come back in the end with my final commentaries.
You want to talk about reparations? We pay reparations.
The United States does not pay reparations. The last time the US government compensated a group for racial injustice was in 1988 towards Japanese Americans. So no, you do not pay reparations. But go on.
What do you mean you want reparations? Our taxpayer dollars, which are mostly white people paying that.
White people make up roughly 60% of the US population, so it would be genuinely strange if they didn't contribute the most in tax dollars. This isn't a valid argument.
Goes to, affordable housing, government programs, EBT, scholarships, DEI, you guys getting jobs.
These are not reparations, they're poverty programs that exist for all Americans, and the data shows that white Americans are the biggest beneficiaries.
Let's take all that, factor in the theft, factor in the crime, factor it in the murders, and then we'll talk about reparations on the show.
Talking about theft when arguing against reparations is honestly comical. 250 years of unpaid labor is the theft.
How about that? You probably won't like that, will you? Because you're not going to like the numbers. But we are all, frankly, exhausted.
She's exhausted about this concept of reparations, yet this administration that she proudly supports spends over $1 billion per day on a war in Iran. So it's not about the money, and it never was.
Factor it in the murders, and then we'll talk about reparations on this show. How about that? You probably won't like that, will you? Because you're not going to like the numbers. But we are all, frankly, exhausted.
Okay, so let's start here. Your entire rant was rooted in racist stereotypes, emotional talking points, and misinformation, not facts. Because saying Black Americans already receive reparations through EBT, affordable housing, DEI, scholarships, and government programs is not only racially offensive, it's intellectually dishonest. But honestly, I'm not even surprised. Because at its core, racism is born of ignorance. An ignorance of history, an ignorance of systems, an ignorance of the very advantages people mistake for superiority. And in your ignorance, you actually seem proud while repeating those talking points. Like putting Black people down somehow gives you this strange sense of superiority. But I'm not here to protect your comfort, because what you completely ignored is who those programs primarily benefit and why many of them were created in the first place. You also simply skipped over that for some of those programs, Black people weren't even eligible when they were created. White Americans make up the largest raw number of recipients in those very programs that you mentioned. Those programs were not created exclusively for Black people. They were created for Americans. But you painted them like some secret pipeline of wealth flowing only to Black communities. Meanwhile, if we're actually following the money, your community still overwhelmingly holds the largest share of wealth, land ownership, inherited assets, corporate control, and political influence in this country. That didn't happen by accident. It happened because your ancestors were allowed to build wealth uninterrupted for generations. Through land ownership, subsidized home ownership, business access, voting rights, legal protections, and government-backed opportunities. While Black Americans, on the other hand, were enslaved, then segregated, then redlined, and then excluded from loans, neighborhoods, schools, contracts, and wealth-building opportunities by law and policy. So no, history didn't just magically disappear because the calendar changed. And DEI is not some magical free Black jobs program either. DEI exists because this country actually spent generations excluding qualified people from jobs, universities, housing, contracts, and opportunities based on race and gender alone. Ironically, you white women have statistically benefited from diversity and affirmative action efforts more than any other group in this country. But suddenly, when Black Americans benefit just a little bit from inclusion, people like you call it unfair. Many of you actually vote against your own interests just to preserve your entitlement to privilege. But then claim that privilege doesn't exist. Interesting, isn't it? And where were voices like yours when Black veterans came home from serving this country, only to be denied many of the same housing and educational opportunities that helped build the white middle class? Where were you when banks literally drew red lines around Black neighborhoods and denied loans to qualified Black families? Where were you when Black Americans were legally locked out of competition altogether? You see, while your parents and your grandparents were often free to build wealth, buy property, move wherever they wanted, and accumulate security, many Black families were surviving racial terror, voter suppression, and legalized discrimination. And yes, those systems were strongly enforced under American law. Now let's address your crime narrative, because every time any subject about race or Black people comes up, someone tries to weaponize crime statistics while ignoring the very conditions that produce crime in the first place. We all know that poverty and crime correlate across every racial group. When communities are historically underfunded, segregated, denied investment, over-policed, and blocked from wealth-building opportunities for generations, social outcomes suffer. That is not a Black defect. That is what inequality produces. And finally, your stupid idea that only white people pay for America is one of the most arrogant, historically ignorant narratives imaginable. Black Americans work. We pay taxes. We serve in the military. And we build businesses. We also contribute to Social Security, Medicare, payroll taxes, property taxes, sale taxes, and federal taxes, just like every other citizen. But you already know that. So this conversation is not about begging anyone for anything. It's about whether America is mature enough to honestly confront the long-term damage created by its own policies, instead of hiding behind foolish stereotypes every time accountability enters the room. That is the real conversation. Let me know when you're ready to have it.
You want to talk about reparations? We pay reparations. What do you mean you want reparations? Our taxpayer dollars, which are mostly white people paying that, goes to, affordable housing, government programs, EBT, scholarships, DEI, you guys getting jobs. Holy shit. Let's take all that, factor in the theft, factor in the crime, factor it in the murders, and then we'll talk about reparations on this show. How about that? You probably won't like that, will you? Because you're not going to like the numbers. But we are all, frankly, exhausted.
This is a very ignorant and facetious take on the topic of reparations. Government assistance programs who anybody can apply for, including immigrants who just got here yesterday, almost nobody qualifies for, is supposed to be reparations for 400 years of chattel slavery. And what does crime rates have to do with reparations? I'm starting to believe that most people actually don't know what reparative justice actually is. It's supposed to repair something that happened in the past. And I just love how people always make it seem like Black people are the only ones who commit crimes. Like, we're the only, crimes happen in every single community. This is the reason why I will never take the opinion of outsiders into account when talking about Black American issues. There's just not, it's just too unserious.
Amazing about this, that makes me so proud. You can look at anything that's happening, just about anything that's happening in the world today, and tie it to slavery. You look at the highways in Atlanta, you look at the naming of Wall Street, you look at sugar that we eat. But the thing that stuck out to me was health care, that you can tie health care to slavery. How?
Absolutely. So there's a piece in there about why we're the only Western industrialized country that doesn't have universal health care. And it starts with opposition to universal health care that occurs right after slavery, when the Freedmen's Bureau was trying to offer free health care to the formerly enslaved. And there was white opposition to that. And so even today, you see with polling that white Americans will reject social programs if they think large numbers of Black people will benefit from them.
When white people in the United States balk at the idea of paying reparations to Black Americans who descended from slaves, they disagree with the Bible. Reparations are a form of compensation or restitution made to those who have suffered injustice, particularly those in cases of racial inequality, discrimination, and slavery. The idea of paying reparations to Black Americans is not a new one. It has been a topic of discussion for decades, if not centuries. However, it has gained renewed attention and support in recent years, following the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement and the growing recognition of systemic racism in American society. As a Christian, I believe that reparations are not only a matter of justice and equity, but also a reflection of God's character and values. In the Bible, we see numerous examples of God's concern for the oppressed, the marginalized, and the downtrodden. From the Israelites' liberation from slavery in Egypt to the ministry of Jesus among the poor and the outcast, we see a consistent theme of God's love for those who are on the margins of society. One of the key biblical principles that underlie the idea of reparations is the concept of restitution. In the book of Leviticus, we see God commanding the Israelites to make restitution to those whom they have wronged. Leviticus 6, 1 through 5 says, "If anyone sins and commits a breach of faith against the Lord by deceiving his neighbor in a matter of deposit or security or through robbery, or if he has oppressed his neighbor or has found something lost and lied about it, swearing falsely in any of all the things that people do and sin thereby, if he has sinned and has realized his guilt and will restore what he took by robbery when he got it by oppression or deposit that was committed to him, or the lost thing that he found, or anything about which he has sworn falsely, he shall restore in full and shall add a fifth to it and give it to him to whom it belongs on the day that he realizes his guilt." This passage emphasizes the importance of making restitution to those who have been wronged, and not just restoring what was taken, but adding to it as a form of compensation. This principle of restitution can be applied to the issue of reparations to Black Americans who have suffered centuries of enslavement, discrimination, and systemic oppression. Another biblical principle that supports the idea of reparations is the concept of Jubilee. In Leviticus 25, God commands the Israelites to observe a Jubilee every 50th year, during which all debts are forgiven, all slaves to be set free, and all property to be returned to its original owners. This was a radical idea of economic justice designed to prevent the accumulation of wealth and power in the hands of a few, and to ensure that all members of society had equal access to resources and opportunities. The idea of Jubilee can be seen as a model for reparations in that it seeks to address the root causes of inequality and oppression rather than just treating the symptoms. By forgiving debts, freeing slaves, and returning property, Jubilee seeks to create a more just and equitable society, one in which everyone has the opportunity to flourish. As a Christian, I believe paying reparations to Black Americans is only a matter of justice and equity, but also it is a reflection of God's values and character. Through the biblical principles of restitution and Jubilee, we see a model for how we can address the historical and systemic injustices that have plagued our society for far too long. While the issue of reparations is complex and contentious, I believe that as Christians, we have a responsibility to seek justice.
I 100% agree that the United States owes the Black community reparations, and this is why. It's not about white people owing Black people. It's not about white people being punished for the sins of our ancestors. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's about white people standing in solidarity with a community that has suffered grave, egregious injustices at the hands of the United States government. But first, we must decenter ourselves in this conversation, alienate ourselves from our privilege, and hold the United States institutions and systems accountable for the wrongs that they never rectified. From slavery to Black codes, to convict leasing, to Jim Crow segregation, to anti-Black housing policies, to mass incarceration, we have never rectified our wrongs as a country. If you look at our criminal justice system, 1 in 3 Black males carry convicted felon label. That is a real stat. Is it because they're inherently evil, or they just need more personal accountability, or is there something larger at play? All the data shows by every statistical measure, the Black community has been disproportionately impacted by every institution or system in the United States, from education to healthcare to criminal justice system to banking to housing, which we still have de jure segregation in effect today. And when it comes to housing, neither parties are absolved from this because both parties were responsible for the de jure segregation that we see today. The New Deal by Franklin Roosevelt didn't invent the segregationist practice of housing, but it did institutionalize it. Restricting access to capital for Black families while enriching white families, the big reason why we see the generational wealth gap we see today. And remember, public housing wasn't initially for poor people, it was for working class white families. But because of laws and policies implemented by the United States government, it reinforced segregation because public housing was to reflect the racial composition of the existing neighborhood. And we had redlining and gentrification of neighborhoods, the residual effects of all these policies that we still see today. Reparations is about rebuilding and investing in the black community. Our government was held accountable to some extent for the grave injustices that we committed, the atrocities that we committed against Native Americans. We were also held accountable for the Japanese internment camps. But the United States government never made good on its 40 acres and a mule to the black community. Everybody else got paid. The United States was held accountable for these injustices. I'm a convicted felon. I had to pay a debt to society, to the United States government, to the state of Florida, for the crimes that I committed. I was held accountable. To this day, my past is still being used against me. In fact, if I were to go before a judge today, the first thing he would do is bring up my past and say it's probably a pretty good indicator of what my future will be. But we don't keep that same energy for our government. We don't hold them to the same level of accountability and to the same level of scrutiny. So if you're thinking to yourself, I don't know anybody, you're absolutely right. But our government does. And as citizens of the United States who uphold the Constitution, it is our duty, it is our responsibility to hold our government accountable. As taxpayers, as citizens of the United States, we all pay, not just white people. Anytime there's an injustice in the United States by a government agency, whether it's the police department, sheriff's department, any government agency, the taxpayers are always the ones that foot the bill. Why? Because in America, we believe in justice, or at least we say we do. No matter what side of the aisle you're on, I'm sure we can all agree that our government is corrupt. Stop allowing them to make us turn on each other. What better way to stand in solidarity with our brothers and sisters than to advocate to make right what has been wrong and never been rectified? People ask me all the time, what are my solutions to the problems that I speak on? Well, I can assure you that this would be a step in the right direction. This is the pathway forward. Reparations in America.
The only reason anybody would be against reparations is if they don't feel that this country has anything to repair in how it has treated and continues to treat black folks.
I don't think reparations for something that happened 150 years ago for whom none of us currently living are responsible is a good idea.
First off, Mitch, you were alive 100 years ago. Look at you. Second, reparations are not just about slavery. They're about repairing the incessant harm that has been done to black people in this country since we were stolen and brought here, and that does not end with slavery. These people act like Jim Crow was just like a minor inconvenience. It was violence! And I don't know if y'all been looking around lately, but basically reparations should be owed for what was done like 15 minutes ago in this country.
We've, tried to deal with our original sin of slavery by fighting a civil war.
If the Civil War was really about righting the wrongs of slavery, then we wouldn't have all these Confederate flags and Confederate statues still just confederating around to this day. To this day!
By passing landmark civil rights legislation.
These people wake up every morning to undo civil rights legislation.
We've elected an African-American president.
Now you know you ain't vote for Barack. We need to become reparationists. We need to make preparations for reparations. And I say that comes with us first making reparations a part of our culture. This should be a part of our lifestyle. And we should be demanding that reparations be given to us by whoever is in the presidency and by whoever wants to be president. And also by our local and state governments. And I don't think that means just waiting to the last minute of an election and saying that we're not going to vote for you unless you give us reparations. Nah. We should be getting behind candidates who already believe in this. And all you white folks who want to be down, baby, you better be reparationists too. That's the new question for your white friends. Do you believe black people should get reparations? See, reparations are not a capital gain. They're an ethical practice. Because in a society where advancement is determined by money, the only way to correct the systematic hindrance of that advancement is by providing money. Reparations are not some far-reaching thing that have never been figured out before. We need to stop looking at reparations as something we need to imagine. Consider them as something that is very real that needs to happen. What we need to imagine is what we are going to do with the reparations to make sure that our community and ourselves are taken care of. We need to become reparationists.
Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. I hope you've heard the discussions that this white lady got from Americans. Some people don't understand the challenges that black people went through to be where they are today. Some people don't understand that blacks have had to endure a lot of hardships to be who they are today. And therefore, if you can take their plight for granted and start projecting yourself as the person who made the most contribution to America that we have today, then it means you've decided to ignore a huge chunk of American history. They say that you can't speak about American history without highlighting on black people. And blacks have influenced a lot of things that we have today in the United States. Blacks have worked, given free labor that was being used to industrialize America. They provided that labor that was used to sustain global trade between America and other nations. Remember that without the labor that black people provided, cotton could not really come out of farms. And that was one of the leading trading items during those days. And the work that black people did in these farms allowed American commerce to remain stable. Also remember that black people were used as collateral for white slave owners, where they could use blacks as collaterals to obtain loans to sustain their businesses. Look at that. All those things that I've highlighted. Do you see how much blacks have given to America? Do you see how much black people have had to endure just to exist in a place where some of them did not call or did not even beg to be taken to? It is sad that some people cannot understand the challenges that black people have had to go through to be where they are today. Some people cannot really fathom the kind of challenges, the kind of struggles, the kind of persecutions, the kind of deaths and threats that blacks have endured to be where they are today. And this reminds me of the contribution blacks made when it comes to innovations and inventions in America. You can't just rubbish all that away and start talking about blacks with a lot of disregard to their own existence. The other day we saw the United Nations Security Council, vote to recognize slavery as one of the worst crimes against humanity that ever existed in the world. And with that, they allowed nations to vote. But the United States did not think it is important to appreciate that they were wrong to black people. They abstained. They voted no. So it tells you the kind of mindset that white power structures have when it comes to discussions that are talking about black people. So why is it that this talk that this lady is bringing forward remains flawed? Because you can't say that EBT, welfares, and SNAP are things that you can tell me that are the ones that replace reparations that black people need to get. At least you recognize that there are reparations that blacks needed to get, but still you go down the rabbit hole to kind of disparage blacks for demanding what is rightfully in line with global standards. Other races have been given reparations. Japanese Americans were given reparations. The Jews were reparated. Why is it that when it comes to black people, it is your hard-earned money? You don't want blacks to be involved. You don't want blacks to partake in this important thing. It is sad that this is the level we have reached, but I am happy that many black people gave their thoughts and talked to this lady in the best way possible. Share your thoughts down in the comment section. If watching us for the first time, remember to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share. Thank you. Let's meet on the next one.